Have you ever felt that your quiet, consistent work is going unnoticed, while others who are more vocal seem to move ahead? This is the core frustration at the heart of a powerful lesson learned in an unlikely place, a factory floor. A young worker's decade of excellence culminated not in a celebration, but in a termination that forced him to reevaluate everything. His return to his elderly mentor unveils a two-part philosophy for sustainable success that addresses the pain of being undervalued. The young man entered the factory as an apprentice, assigned to work under an elderly technician whose hands moved with quiet precision. The older man's movements were economical and sure, a silent demonstration of a lifetime spent understanding machinery. He rarely spoke, but when he did, his words carried weight. His first instruction to the new apprentice was simple. He said, "Talk less, do more, master every machine, understand every process." This became the young man's guiding principle. While the other new apprentices spent their breaks socializing and trying to get the manager's attention, he remained focused. He saw their efforts as a distraction from the real work. He dedicated himself to learning the function of every piece of equipment. He learned not just how to operate the machines, but how to listen to them. A slight change in a motor's hum could signal an impending failure. A subtle vibration could indicate a misalignment that would cause a bottleneck hours later. He learned to diagnose problems before they stopped the production line. This silent dedication built a reputation for reliability that required no self-promotion. He became the person people sought when a complex issue arose. The mentor observed this growth with a quiet approval. Yet in his eyes, there was a deeper wisdom, a knowing look that suggested the apprentice was only learning the first part of a much larger lesson. Over a decade, the young man became the factory's most knowledgeable technician. He was the quiet backbone of the entire operation. His competence was so complete that managers and colleagues alike came to depend on his solutions for everything from minor adjustments to major breakdowns. He could anticipate needs and solve problems almost instinctively. He believed he had found the complete path to success. He thought that silent excellence, this unwavering technical mastery, was all that was required. The foundation of skill was set solidly beneath him. But the retired mentor, watching from a distance, knew this was only half of what the young man needed to learn. True sustainability in any organization requires more than just being the most capable person in the room. It requires an understanding of how value is perceived and acknowledged by the system itself. The young man had mastered the machinery, but he had not yet learned how to navigate the human ecosystem that surrounded it. He was an indispensable part, but not yet seen as a leader. After the mentor retired, the young man continued his diligent work, expecting his hard-won expertise would naturally lead to advancement. He maintained the same quiet precision, solving problems before they escalated and keeping the production line running smoothly. He believed his value was self-evident, a solid fact that the system would inevitably recognize and reward. He watched his colleagues with less experience but more visibility received promotions and pay raises. These were the people who spoke often in meetings, who made sure the managers saw their contributions. They understood the rhythm of recognition in a way he did not. Their careers gained momentum, while his remained stationary. Despite being the most technically capable worker, he remained in the same pay bracket for years. His salary did not reflect the growing responsibility he shouldered or the depth of his institutional knowledge. The gap between his skill and his compensation widened into a silent frustration. Managers praised his work ethic in private, but passed him over for leadership positions during reviews. They would thank him for his dedication, yet when it came time to choose a team leader, they selected someone else. They valued his silent support, but did not see him as a public face for the department. The factory's success increasingly depended on his unseen contributions, while others received public credit. When a new machine was installed efficiently, another colleague accepted the praise. When a major production target was met against the odds, he was the one who had recalibrated the equipment overnight, but a different name was mentioned in the success announcement. This created a quiet crisis of confidence, making him question whether his mentor's philosophy was flawed. Had he misunderstood the lesson? Was his commitment to silent diligence actually a limitation? The foundation of his work ethic began to feel like a cage. He began to wonder if silent diligence was actually a constraint rather than an advantage in the modern workplace. The system seemed to reward visibility over genuine competence, creating a fundamental misalignment. It felt as if the rules of the game had changed and no one had told him. The young man reached a critical juncture where his belief in pure technical excellence began to fracture. The certainty he had built over a decade was now clouded with doubt. This period of questioning was uncomfortable, but it was necessary. It prepared him for the mentor's unexpected second lesson, a lesson that would address the reality of how value is perceived within any human organization. He was ready to learn about strategic visibility, not as a replacement for skill, but as its necessary partner. During a visit to his retired mentor, the young man expressed his frustration about being overlooked for promotion. He described the promotions others received and the private praise that never translated into tangible rewards. He felt his decade of dedication was being taken for granted. Instead of advising more diligence, the mentor suggested a counterintuitive strategy. He told the young man to take a day off. The instruction was specific. He said, "Must request the day off using whatever reason you like. It is time for you to give yourself a break." This advice directly contradicted the young man's entire work ethic. The young man hesitated. He feared his absence might actually prove he was dispensable rather than essential. He had never taken an unplanned day off in 10 years. The idea of voluntarily creating a gap felt inherently risky. He worried it could backfire and confirm that the factory could run smoothly without him. He followed the advice reluctantly, taking his first unplanned day off in years due to a fabricated illness. He called in sick, a simple act that felt like a betrayal of his own principles. He spent the day anxious, imagining the production line faltering without him, or worse, functioning perfectly well. Upon returning, he discovered a cascade of unresolved issues that had accumulated during his absence. The silence he left behind had not been filled. Machines had stalled because no one else knew the subtle adjustments required to keep them running at peak efficiency. Production targets were missed as small problems snowballed into significant delays. Managers had struggled with problems only he could solve. They had attempted fixes, but their efforts only highlighted the depth of his unique knowledge. His temporary withdrawal made his invisible contributions suddenly visible to the entire organization. The systems that seemed to run themselves were in fact dependent on his constant, unseen effort. The factory manager called him into the office. Instead of a reprimand, he received a promotion to senior technician. The manager explicitly cited how his absence revealed the systemic dependencies. He said the promotion was to thank him and encourage him to keep up the good work. This success validated the mentor's strategy. The young man felt a surge of gratitude. His contributions had finally been recognized. Yet, this positive outcome created a dangerous assumption. He began to view this strategic absence not as a rare revelation, but as a reliable tool. He saw it as a guaranteed method for gaining recognition, a simple secret to success he could apply again. He did not yet see the potential for misinterpretation, or how the system might adapt to a pattern it initially found revealing. Emboldened by his promotion, the young man began applying the strategic day-off method with careful timing. He waited for moments when his presence was most critical, when a complex project was nearing completion, or a delicate piece of machinery required his specific attention. He planned his absences not as random breaks, but as calculated interventions. He noticed that after each absence, the factory's performance improved upon his return, reinforcing his value. The temporary disruption he caused seemed to reset the appreciation of his colleagues and managers. Problems that had been tolerated suddenly became urgent in his absence, and his solutions upon returning were met with visible relief and gratitude. This positive reinforcement solidified the strategy in his mind. This created a cyclical pattern where his temporary withdrawals consistently led to recognition and small rewards. A compliment from the manager, a slight bonus, or being entrusted with a more significant task would follow each return. The pattern became predictable. He began to see his career not as a linear path of growth, but as a series of cycles he could influence. He developed an intuitive sense for when his absence would create the most impactful revelation of his importance. He learned to read the subtle signs of workplace stress and dependency. He could feel when the system was leaning most heavily on his silent support, and that was the moment he would choose to step away briefly. The strategy worked so effectively that he began to view it as a reliable tool for maintaining career momentum. It felt like a lever he could pull to generate appreciation and advance his position. Each successful application deepened his confidence in this approach. The initial lesson of silent diligence, the foundation of his skill, began to feel less important. The tactical part of the philosophy started to overshadow the foundational part. He started believing he had mastered the complete philosophy for sustainable success and career advancement. He thought he had cracked the code. He had his technical mastery, and now he had this clever method to ensure it was seen and rewarded. He felt in control of his professional destiny in a way he never had before. This pattern continued for months, creating an illusion of control and predictability in his professional trajectory. He achieved a comfortable balance between consistent work and strategic visibility. He felt he had found the perfect rhythm. He failed to recognize a crucial flaw. He was applying only half of a deeper, more complex wisdom about human systems. He was treating a profound insight about value and perception as a simple mechanical trick. He saw the strategy as a tool for his benefit, not understanding that systems are living things that learn and adapt. He did not consider how his pattern might be perceived from the other side, from the perspective of the managers who had to manage the instability his absences created. He was playing a short-term game with a long-term strategy, mistaking the initial success for a permanent solution. After a particularly successful application of the strategy, the young man arrived at work expecting further recognition. He had timed his absence perfectly, allowing a critical project to falter just enough to remind everyone of his unique skills. He walked in feeling confident, ready to receive the gratitude and acknowledgement that had become part of his expected routine. Instead of praise, he was called into the manager's office. The atmosphere was different this time. It was formal and cold. The manager did not smile. He handed the young man a termination notice. The paper felt foreign and heavy in his hands. The explanation cited patterned unreliability and creating unnecessary operational instability. The manager explained that while his skills were not in question, his repeated, predictable absences had become a liability. The very strategy that had previously brought promotion was now framed as a problem for the organization. This sudden reversal shattered his confidence and his understanding of what constituted a valuable contribution. The ground he had stood on for over a decade crumbled beneath him. He had believed he was playing the system wisely, but the system had been observing him all along. He realized with horror that the system had adapted to his pattern. What he saw as strategic revelation, the management saw as a recurring disruption. They had redefined his tactical absences as simple inconsistency. They had decided that long-term stability was more valuable than intermittent brilliance. The termination forced him to confront the possibility that his entire approach to work and success was flawed. He had combined deep technical excellence with what he thought was clever visibility, yet it was not enough for job security. He had missed something fundamental. He faced the painful truth that competence and tactics alone could not guarantee his place. There was a deeper layer to the mentor's wisdom that he had failed to grasp. He had treated the philosophy like a set of instructions to be followed, not as a living principle to be understood. The young man's world collapsed. The certainty he had built was gone. He was left with nothing but questions. This crisis became the necessary precondition for understanding the complete philosophy he had missed. He had to seek his mentor again, not for a new trick, but for a true understanding. He needed to learn what he had failed to see the first time. The failure was not in the strategy itself, but in his mechanical application of it. He had focused on the effect, not the intention behind the lesson. He was ready to listen, not for what he wanted to hear, but for what he needed to learn. The young man returned to his mentor, defeated and seeking understanding about his termination. He explained how the very strategy that had earned him a promotion had now cost him his job. He felt betrayed by the system and confused by the outcome. The mentor listened patiently, then delivered the sobering truth. He said, "You heard only half the lesson." He explained that the young man had focused on the action without understanding the spirit behind it. He had applied the technique but missed the wisdom. He explained the light bulb principle. No one pays attention to a light that is always on, the mentor said. It's only when it goes off that people notice. The young man nodded, thinking this was the justification for his actions. But the mentor continued. The deeper wisdom was that you cannot intentionally flicker the light without people eventually replacing it. A light that flickers on purpose is not a reliable source of illumination. It becomes a nuisance. People will tolerate an occasional genuine failure, but they will not accept a pattern of manufactured instability. The complete lesson balanced silent excellence with genuine presence, not tactical absence. It was about being a steady flame, not a flashing bulb. The value came from consistent, reliable contribution, not from creating moments of dramatic revelation. True sustainability comes from being consistently valuable while maintaining gratitude for the opportunity to serve. It is about seeing your work as a service, not as a transaction. When you approach your role with thankfulness, your presence becomes a gift, not a lever for manipulation. The mentor emphasized that relationships and genuine contribution matter more than manipulated perceptions. People sense intention. They can tell when an action is meant to build something together versus when it is meant to serve only one person's interest. Trust is built on authenticity. Strategic withdrawal was meant as an occasional revelation, not a repeating pattern that creates dependency games. It was a one-time lesson to prove a point about unseen value. To turn it into a recurring tactic was to misunderstand its purpose entirely. It was a medicine, not a food. The young man understood that success requires balancing competence with authentic presence and gratitude. He saw that his termination wasn't a failure of the philosophy, but a consequence of applying it incompletely and mechanically. He had treated a profound life lesson as a simple career hack. He realized he had been trying to control the perception of his value instead of simply being valuable. He had focused on being seen instead of on seeing the needs of the organization, the people in it, and his role within that larger whole. The goal was not to win a game, but to contribute to a community. The foundation of skill was essential, but the heart of the matter was the spirit in which that skill was offered. This story reveals that sustainable success requires both technical mastery and wisdom about human systems. You cannot rely on skill alone, nor can you depend on playing games with perception. Both are needed, like two wings for a bird to fly. True security comes from genuine contribution balanced with mindful presence. It is not about manipulating how others see you. It is about doing good work with a thankful heart. This understanding changes how you approach your job and your relationships. It guides you toward a quieter, more stable kind of inner peace. You stop trying to control the light and simply focus on being a steady flame. This is There to Do Motivation Stories. Thanks for watching and stay blessed.